Good morning, everyone. Our session speaker today is Troy Kimoto, and he will be sharing his expertise on emerald ash borer in Vancouver, providing us with updates and the lessons learned. In the late 1990s, Troy earned a Masters of Pest Management at Simon Fraser University in forest entomology, followed by 2 years working in the forest health industry. He started working for the Canadian Food Inspection Agency in 2001 and has been in his current role as Plant Health Survey Biologist since 2002. In July of that year, he met his career nemesis when emerald ash borer was discovered in Canada for the first time in Windsor, Ontario. Since then, the elusiveness of detecting EAB has shaped how he develops survey procedures for invasive pests. As a survey biologist, his responsibilities include developing survey procedures for plant pests, survey planning and training, providing scientific support to CFIA staff and external stakeholders, coordinating invasive species research within Canada and overseas, and producing outreach products for regulated plant pests. Let's all give a warm welcome to Troy Kimoto.
Great. Thank you very much. So, I'm going to talk about emerald ash borer, and my therapist says this is actually good for me because this thing's been kicking my butt for 22 years, so it's good for me to talk about it. And anyways, so I'm going to talk about emerald ash borer. This is the critter here. So I'll pass this display around, and EAB is up here, and then there's a bunch of different lookalikes on the other side there. So you guys can just pass this around. A couple other things, over on that side over there, there's a bunch of wood samples of emerald ash borer. There's some displays. There's a bunch of pest cards. So feel free to grab some. If you want like a couple hundred, maybe just see how much you're left. If there's not much left, you want a couple hundred, just leave me a business card and I'll send some to you guys there. Yeah, for sure. And you can pass, if you want to pass all those samples around, you can do that too. Yeah. So, we're going to talk about emerald ash borer. It's a tiny little jewel beetle. It's about 3 centimeters long at the most, about 1.5 centimeters wide. It's metallic green. It's super shiny. And to me, although those specimens don't look like it because I did a poor job pinning them, beetles in the Agrylus genus here kind of look like a bullet to me. If you kind of turn EAB that way, this is like the projectile part. That's the part that gets hit by the hammer. So it kind of, to me, it looks like a bullet. There's some other insects in the display case that kind of have more of an almond shape to it, kind of pointy at both ends. Whereas to me, EAB's got like a flat head and then a pointy bum. I don't know why I'm holding this. So emerald ash borer is not native to Canada. It's native to Eastern Asia. Specifically China, the Korean peninsula, and Japan. The interesting thing about EAB is over there in its native country, it's not really a pest. We were trying to do some molecular genetic work on EAB, so we were trying to contact scientists in Japan who work on bugs, and they say it's very difficult to find. I was setting up an experiment in some forest in northeastern China. It was a mixed hardwood forest, fair bit of ash in there, probably about 20-25% ash. Walking through it, didn't see EAB at all. The only time I saw EAB in China, it was in a pretty big city, Harbin, in the northeast, and it was attacking North American ash, green ash. It's the only time I've seen EAB in China. So over there, not a pest, and what we're going to talk about here in Canada, North America, it's a big problem. I was just working with the city of Calgary last couple of days. We did a bit of branch sampling. What I told them, and I'm going to swear a bit here, but like it's a shit kicker. So for Alberta, like it's going to cause a lot of problems, and it's going to be a big mess. So unlike the previous talk, Jeff, kind of positive and good to hear stuff. This one's, you guys are going to join me in therapy pretty soon, I think. So 2002, it was officially discovered in Michigan. But people were thinking that it's probably was there for at least 10 years before that, maybe more. And what happened is that there's a lot of ash in decline, and people were thinking it might have been Aspergillus, a disease. And it wasn't until 2002, and it's actually a pathologist who was looking at to see if it was phytoplasma. He actually determined that it was emerald ash borer. So it was found basically just a little bit southwest of Detroit, 2002, and then right away it's people were seeing it in Detroit. USDA Forest Service and Michigan DNR, they called up Canadian Forest Service and they said, hey, you know what, EAB's in Detroit, right across the river is Windsor. You guys better check your trees. Canadian Forest Service went down there, and there's tons of infestations. I was working in Ottawa. I'm actually from Vancouver, born and raised. I was working in Ottawa at the time, and mid-July, my boss says, yeah, we got a new bug down in Windsor. You got to go check it out. So I was like one of the first 10 Canadians to see it. I've been working on it since 2002, and I've never won a battle with it. Back to EAB. It only attacks and kills true ash, so trees in the Fraxinus genus. So it doesn't go after mountain ash at all. It can kill and attack both healthy and stressed trees. Maybe when the population's low or the population's trying to get established, weakened trees are just an easier host to colonize. But once the population gets big enough, they can attack and kill healthy trees and just ravage through forests, cities, all that. I talked about it not being a pest. It actually wasn't on our radar. Back in 2002, when we first found this, people are trying to do a little bit of background research, diving into the Chinese literature, scientific literature. There's like 3 papers on it. That's it. It's not a problem over there. They weren't studying it. So it wasn't on our radar. Here in North America, emerald ash borer has either like a 1-year life cycle or a 2-year life cycle, mainly dependent upon winter temperature and duration. So here's a photo I took back in 2002, and you can see the ashes in decline there. There's not much left on it. A few leaves there. You got some epicormic shoots at the base, and when we got there, the bark at eye level was sloughing off, and you could see all these galleries. You can see all these exit holes. Right, that decline's pretty obvious. So I was thinking this is going to be an easy thing to find, right? It's going to look like that all the time. And it doesn't. It looks like that when the tree's been attacked for years and years and years. For me, this is the toughest thing I've had to work on in my career. And like the introduction said, it's shaped the way I do surveys. It's completely changed my mentality. Like oftentimes I just throw the kitchen sink. There's not one silver bullet for EAB. I'm looking at different ways to try to survey for it. So for me, it's just totally changed the way I do my job. And I mentioned this is good for me. I get to talk about it. My shrink says it's good. It has kicked my butt. Like I haven't won a single battle with this thing. This is a tough insect to find. So what does it do? What's the big deal about EAB? So females, they don't bore into the bark like a bark beetle, and they don't chew an egg-laying pit like longhorns. What the female does is that she'll lay an egg on the outside of the bark, oftentimes in little cracks and crevices underneath scales, and then a tiny little larvae emerges, and that bores through the outer bark. And once it gets to the inner bark, then it starts to feed in the cambial layer. And what it does is it creates these, often it creates these typical S-shaped galleries. So up here, I'm a little short, but that's where the larvae emerged and bored into the bark. And then as it starts to feed in the cambial layer, the gallery gets wider and it gets longer here. with a 1-year life cycle, typically adults emerge kind of late May, June, depending on temperature and where you are. The adults come out, they fly up to the canopy, they maturation feed on ash leaves, they mate, and then the female will start to lay eggs there. So that's the cycle. That happens in June-ish. Typically, it's the fourth instar or the last stage of the larvae that will then create a little pupal chamber into the sapwood there. It usually overwinters as a late instar larvae or pupae, and then the following spring it starts to develop again, and it emerges as an adult in May, June. And the speaker before, Jeff, talked about weed eater blight, right? And how weed eaters can kind of girdle a tree and lead to decline. That's exactly what the larvae are doing. You know, that one little gallery there, not really affecting the tree too much. But when you have tons and tons and hundreds of those galleries, it's going to eventually girdle the tree and lead to death. So you can see a couple photographs here. This is taken near London, Ontario. You still have some areas that aren't colonized by the insect, right? So if it wasn't for me, the tree would still live for a little bit, but I ripped the crap out of it. But you can see on the other slides there, you know, it's the galleries are completely encircling the tree and basically just cutting off all the nutrients, leading to a decline and death there. So another thing that makes one thing that makes emerald ash borer hard to find and hard to survey for is that on larger diameter trees, mature trees, females will tend to prefer to lay eggs in the upper canopy where the bark is usually thin. On like a small little sapling, thin bark from top to bottom, they can lay eggs anywhere. And, you know, it has to do with the tiny little larvae, right? It's easier for that larvae to go through thin bark than to go through thick bark. So egg laying at the beginning of an infestation on a tree starts up high and it starts to move downwards there. And you can see it, right? There's a little bit of chlorosis, a little bit of decline happening there. And then what happens is that the outer portions of the tree start to die, the top portions of the tree start to die, and the decline happens from the outside inward and from the top downward. The thing about emerald ash borer, I mentioned, attacks healthy and stressed trees. It also attacks trees of all ages. There's not a single age cohort that's not affected. I mean, there is like tiny little, you know, really, really small whips. But, you know, anything in that diameter, it can lead to, it's a good host, and you can have successful attack, and adults are going to emerge from that tree. This is a photo I took over Essex County, just outside of Windsor. We're doing an aerial survey. All those gray trees you see there, those are all ash that are killed by EAB. These are big diameter ones. But it also goes after 10-year-old saplings. This is Kevin Flood's plantation. I can't remember. He had I think he had about 1,000 saplings like that. You can see a little bark crack on that top photo. Take a little knife through it, and you can actually see the gallery in there. So it doesn't matter how old the trees are. What I'm going to do now is just go over some of the symptoms and signs of EAB. And these are things that you can use to go out and try and find it. These are also things I use when I'm branch sampling. Yes, yeah, for sure, yeah. I didn't fully remove all the cambium and all that, but well, actually I did, but I didn't take a photograph of it. But you can see that there's an end part there, quite wide gallery, and then right at the end that's like a little frass plug. And then the actual larvae then started to bore into the sapwood where it's going to pupate. So yeah, and you can see exit holes on even these smaller diameter too. So it's a problem. It's why it's a nightmare. This is an absolute nightmare. Okay, so symptoms, these are a tree's response to some type of biotic factor. These symptoms aren't specific to EAB, but you can see the symptoms from far away. So when you're doing work, you see an ash with chlorosis, or you start to see some decline in your ash. Epicormic shoots, those are symptoms that should scream to you, go check out that tree further, go take a closer look. Especially woodpecker feeding. If you're in an area that has good woodpecker habitat, that woodpeckers are going to be, in that area, blonding or woodpecker feeding is like a huge, huge symptom. If I see any type of woodpecker activity on an ash, I am taking a look at that thing. So signs, we're going to switch to signs now. Signs are what the actual insect creates. And it has very typical signs. In I think one of the fin display there, and then in some of the samples, you can actually see the D-shaped exit hole. It's perfectly D-shaped here. It's a couple millimeters wide, about 1.5 millimeters tall, but they are distinctly D-shaped. I showed some S-shaped galleries. Those are also very distinct for emerald ash borer. Unfortunately, though, when a tree just gets polluted with EAB and there's larvae everywhere, the galleries don't maintain that tight S shape. They can kind of meander a little bit more. Bark cracks, splits that expose the galleries underneath, that's another sign. And then, obviously, a telltale sign is when you actually find the grub or the larvae within the tree. That one is a 4th instar. That's the last larval stage. It gets up to about 3 centimeters in length. It's got 10 segments, of which 7 of these are bell-shaped. So those are things that you can kind of use when you're out and about to try and determine, if your ash has EAB. So now we're just going to visually go through some of these symptoms and signs. So chlorosis, yellowing of the foliage. Doesn't happen all the time with EAB, but sometimes it does. To me, thinning crown, leaf on or leaf off. If you see an ash that has a thinning crown, like that tree on the right, to me, that's an ash that I want to take a look at, right? I want to figure out what's going on, what is causing that thinning. Here's a picture down in Windsor. The trees in the background there, those are all ash. You can see how a lot of them don't have leaves. Some of them do, but definitely a lot of thinning and some dieback there. Another photo I took here in Windsor of ash, and you can see a little bit of chlorosis and also that dieback happening too. Epicormic shoots, once again, a lot of things can cause epicormics to arise, not just EAB. But, if I see an ash and it's got a lot of chlorotic shoots or epicormic shoots going out, I'm going to go there and take a look at it. And if the epicormic shoot is caused by EAB, what you want to do is wherever the shoot is, then you're going to start peeling the bark right above it, and that's where the gallery is going to be. Here's an example of an ash branch in a park in Vancouver, very close to where the member of the public first reported it. When I saw that, and with the proximity to the adult interception, I said I'm cutting down those branches, and those branches actually turned out to be positive. And just want to show you here, I mentioned, if you got epicormic shoots coming out, you want to sample just above it. You can see the buds here that are forming, okay, in response to the gallery there. And then woodpecker feeding. This is such a huge, huge symptom. And anytime I see even just a little bit of woodpeckering on that ash, I want to try to figure out what's going on in that tree. This is Cote Street in Winnipeg, 2017. There's a resident looking outside front door, sees all that woodpeckering on the ash, reports it to the city. City takes a look. They see that it's EAB. They give us a call too. We come out and I came out and did some work there. But you can see, I don't know if that's like a hairy or a downy woodpecker right at the top here. But you can see it's feeding up there. This is a really good example. Sometimes you don't get that woodpecker feeding all the way to the bottom. You know, I mentioned EAB likes to attack up top first. So this is in Ottawa, and it was only the upper branches that had the woodpecker feeding. And if you get the binoculars out, you can actually kind of see the galleries. That much of the bark has been taken off, and you can really see the exposed galleries there. Just bark cracks here. You know, you can see the gallery underneath on the photo on the left. The one on the right, I just wanted to show, you know, that one side of the tree there, you can see how the galleries are starting to meander a bit more, whereas the galleries on the left side, this part of the tree hasn't been as colonized as much. Maybe there's a bit more energy to put towards the fences. That kind of maybe keeps it that tight S shape. Whereas over here, it's been attacked for a couple of years, and you can see some of the galleries are not maintaining that tight, typical S shape to them. So, little introduction about EAB. What I want to do now is talk about EAB in Vancouver. One thing I forgot to mention, within Canada, every eastern province except for Newfoundland and PEI have it. So Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, Quebec, Ontario, Manitoba have EAB. BC now has it. So the only two provinces that we're not sure of yet are Alberta and Saskatchewan. So those are the only two provinces that so far seem to be free of. But anyways, so last year, middle of June, there's a guy, he's got his laptop, and he's sitting outside close to BC Place. He's sitting under a couple oak trees, and then this green beetle falls on his shoulder. And I don't know about you guys, like, I work with bugs, I don't mind bugs, but, I would have just brushed it right off, right? I wouldn't even looked at it, I just would have brushed it off. He looked at it, grabbed it, put it in a container, went home. When he Googled it, he Googled correctly that it was emerald ash borer, and then he Googled correctly to contact us. So there's a lot of luck that happened in order for him to report that to us. I've been doing this for 22 odd years. I've never had anybody report an adult to me. People always see, a woodpeckered ash tree. That's what they usually report. That's what always what they report. And I've never had anyone submit a proper EAB adult to me. So anyways, he emails me. I look at the photos. I'm like, yeah, that looks like it. I go, hey, can I meet you? I got to grab the specimen so we can send it into our lab, get it confirmed. So I meet him, and he gives me the bug. And, you're supposed to be professional, right? When you're dealing with public. I look at it, I go, I dropped an F-bomb. I'm like, holy, I couldn't believe it. But as soon as you get the beetle, okay, so here's a close-up here. You got BC Place. That's where the Lions play. We just had the Grey Cup right there last weekend. So that balloon is where that gentleman was sitting. It's not a very forested part. It's downtown Vancouver. And then once that we confirmed the adult, what we did is we kind of went to the areas closest to it that had ash, and we started doing some surveys. So we got the binoculars out, and we visually assessed every ash close to it. These ash, there's about 14 of them that were about 100 feet from where the adult landed on the guy. So we put a couple traps in those trees. We also did some branch sampling there, all negative in 2023. I want to point out this photo because we went to a nearby park that had about 30 ash in it, and we stood in the middle of the park and just did a scan, and we looked at all those trees in the background there. Those are all ash. The tree with the red arrow, when we actually did branch sampling the following March, this is in July 2023, so the following March, when we branch sampled that tree with the arrow, it's positive. But you look at it, and it looks pretty good, right? It's like got a pretty full crown. There's no chlorosis. There's not even any like slight dieback at all. right? There's no woodpecker in on it. There's no epicormic shoots, nothing. We sampled it and it was positive. So, yeah. So still going back to last year, 2023, we decided to put out some traps. So we put out 54 traps. Roughly half were the sticky green prism traps on the left here. These are basically just big pieces of plastic with glue on the outside, or we used 12-unit funnel traps. And we would use extension poles, put the traps as high as you can into the canopy. Each trap was baited with a pheromone that smells like a female, and it also had a pouch that contained a leaf alcohol. And that leaf alcohol doesn't smell like an ash leaf, it just smells like a hardwood leaf, so it's not that specific. City of Vancouver, green circles are all their ash trees, yellow circles are where we place traps, red dot is where that beetle fell on the guy. The red circle is a 2-kilometer buffer zone. So we put most of the traps within 2 kilometers of that adult interception. But we put some in some clusters there off to the southwest of it. We didn't put traps on the east or the like due south. We just didn't have enough time. So we got lucky. I mentioned, that person reporting an adult to us. That's never happened before. When we did a visual assessment, it didn't look like there was any obvious signs of attack, right? So we kind of think we found it, fairly early. The scary thing is that when the guy reports an adult, it had to come from somewhere, right? And then now you got to find out where it came from. So we had to try to go find it. So now we're going to jump to this year, beginning of March. The Canadian Forest Service, about 12 years ago, they developed a really good survey tool called branch sampling. So CFS from Sault Ste. Marie, that was the office that developed that survey procedure. They came out this March and it gave me a hand. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to try to take branches from ash trees. And we want them fairly tall. They got to be fairly big, right? And we take 2 branches, anywhere from 3 to 10 centimeters in diameter. We're trying to take them from the south aspect there. This is the actual procedural document for branch sampling. If you do want a copy, you can Google it. If you're having a hard time finding it, just give me an email and I'll flip a copy to you. So what we started to do in March is we either used a city bucket truck or we had a pole saw, and we started doing the branch sampling. And we started very close to where the interception was, and then we radiated outwards from that. I mentioned that Cooper's Park tree that had the vertical epicormic shoots, so that was one of the first branches that we took down, and it was positive. You can see the galleries there on the right side. There's not a lot of great woodpecker habitat in downtown Vancouver. You have to have a spot where, trees can kind of die off and they can have some nesting habitat. But there is a little bit of woodpecker activity. So from the ground, when I'm trying to assess a tree and pick a tree that we're going to sample and then pick branches that we're going to collect, you can't, that woodpecker feeding, there's no way that you could see it. The only time that you see it is when you actually drop the branch. And then we would scan the branch, and then if we ever saw any activity like that, we would flag it because we know we want to target that first thing when we're starting to peel. So yeah, here's another branch there. These are 2 different branches, and they're the only 2 branches in all of Vancouver that had any type of woodpecker activity. But as soon as we saw that, we knew that's where we wanted to start to do the peel, and you can see that's where the gallery is. So we're just using draw knives, right? We got vices. You can also use just a hand knife as well. But one of the things that you have to do is when you're using a draw knife, you got to make sure that you're going kind of shallow. You just kind of like scraping and skimming off layer after layer. If you go too deep, right, with either your knife or your draw knife. All these red marks here show areas where the sapwood is exposed, right? I went too deep. You know, the yellow part here, you can see here's the white cambial tissue, right? You know, you scrape off most of that. But if I go too deep, you can see it turns white, because I'm hitting the sapwood. And here, even though this is a pretty big gallery and it does etch the sapwood, because I went so deep, I actually took that off. So you have to be careful when you are doing the branch sampling. Just kind of go slow and easy. Like that Whitesnake song. Anybody my age? So we did a whole bunch of branch sampling from March till about, what date is that there? Yeah, for 3 weeks in March. And we didn't find a single exit hole on any of the branches that had galleries. So we still don't know where that adult came from, right? I need an exit hole to you know, because that's how an adult's got to emerge through, right? So no exit hole. We're still looking. Unfortunately, or not unfortunately. So I was working mainly with the parks crew, and they have a great ash inventory, right? So we're going checking out all the ash. But what we didn't realize is that the engineering department also has an inventory for some of the infrastructure that they had. And we found out that there was engineering infrastructure probably only about 200 feet away from where the adult was found. We didn't look at it right away. But at the end of March, we went there, and as soon as I got there, you could tell this was ground zero. Ash trees were in decline. Somebody, I don't know who it is, this is the downtown east side, right? So a lot of homeless people outside. Somebody actually started hacking through the trees. And on that second photo there on the left, that's actually somebody with an axe hacking through it. And they totally removed all that bark. That's not me at all. And then you go to another tree, and what they did is only where an exit hole was, they did one slash, flared it open, saw the gallery. So they were learning how to do this. And, you know, I was thinking I was the first person to find this, but somebody else has been there longer than me. Anyways, I want to try to find them and hire them. Anyway, so this is ground zero. There's only 4 infested trees that we could find at the time. All 4 infested trees, it's hard to see, but these little dots all over the place, all the way down to ground level, these are all exit holes. So this is where we think that adult came from that landed on the guy's shoulder. And you can see here, all these trees are right on this overpass, right? So there's not much soil. So maybe the trees are stressed, and maybe that's why this might be the ground zero part for the infestation. So just like out here, you know, ash isn't native. So all the ash in Vancouver, it's all planted. You know, people do say that we're supposed to have Oregon ash. It's native to BC and that Vancouver part, but I've never ever seen Oregon ash at all. The city did plant a couple of those ash trees. I looked at both of them, branch sampled both of them. They're both negative. But in talking to Oregon Department of Agriculture, because they have EAB, they are saying that Oregon ash is susceptible and will get killed by EAB. So March, April, May, I sampled about 120 ash trees. We took roughly 2 branches. Oftentimes I took more. So we did 240 branches. There's 7,500 ash trees. So we did about a 1% sample, 1.5% sample. At the time, we found 15 infested ash at 6 sites, all kind of in the Falls Creek area, all close to downtown Vancouver. Since then, the city has found additional infested trees without branch sampling. So, and these are kind of satellite infestations that they're finding. So Vancouver, we did catch it early, but it is behaving the way that EAB does in Eastern North America. This slide here just shows you the fuchsia dots are all the ash trees by the city. The blue triangles are where we branch sampled, and then the blue diamonds where we branch sampled. The red diamonds and the red square are positive sites for emerald ash borer. So we did an okay job of trying to get, geographic coverage, kind of, the west part, south part, east part of the city. The majority of branch sampling was where we found it in the Falls Creek area. Just a closer view of where these infestations are. So here's Andy Livingston Park. That's where the exit holes are. So it's not too far from where the adult was intercepted. That is your downtown with all the big tall buildings, right? Not a lot of ash. There's a little bit, all the apartments and townhouses and condos. Most of them aren't going to have wood fireplaces. They're all probably going to be natural gas. So more than likely, it wasn't somebody here that brought ash firewood in. However, over here, these are all detached homes, which have a lot more wooden fireplaces. So I would guess that maybe somebody here brought in ash firewood. The other culprits are we have a rail line here, and then we also have a rail line up there. So, I don't know if EAB is hitchhiking or maybe, somebody's moving ash logs from out east. I'm not sure. So we don't know how it got there. It's a weird spot to find it. And we just don't know. So that was Vancouver. And, now we got to look at some adjacent cities. So I go to Burnaby, right next door to Vancouver. It's another big populated city. So I thought, hey, let's do that one next. The great thing about Burnaby is that they only had 854 ash. So it was a lot less ash. We actually sampled 95 trees. So we did about 11% sample. So 10 times the rate as Vancouver. So pretty good coverage. But what just bummed me out is we sampled 95 ash, and those are all the blue diamonds right there. We were on the 95th tree, and we had to get a bucket truck to get it down. And I was on the last bundle of branches, and I had the last branch in my hand, and I mentally checked out. I go, EAB's not in Burnaby, we're going to go somewhere else. I put one knife stroke through it, and I exposed a gallery. And I'm in a room like this with a couple other inspectors. I just walked around the room, and I just did this. Yet again, this thing kicks my ass, right? The last tree, the last branch, and it's positive. Like, I just lost it. I just lost it. But what the sad part is, we did 10% sampling. That's pretty good coverage. So there has to be false negatives, probably in Western Burnaby or Eastern Vancouver, right? So I either picked the wrong tree. So I either picked uninfested trees, or if the tree's infested, I picked the wrong branches, right? But it takes so much time to do it, So to have a positive on the last tree with decent coverage in the whole city, there's false negatives somewhere, right? And that's the frustrating part, is where is it? I could go back and I could resample those trees. I could pick different branches, or I could pick a tree in that cluster that I didn't sample. It could still be negative, right? So here's the infested branch. It's actually on a school district property. We got the city to get some bucket trucks out. So once we found it, we went back to that same tree and we took 6 more branches out, all negative. So it's just a hard, difficult thing to try to find. And that's not good news for Alberta. So this is me. After I stopped swearing, what you don't see is a little bit of moisture coming down here, but, so just want to go over some lessons learned. Woodpecker feeding is a great symptom to use to get your eyes in on a tree and to get you thinking, hey, I got to look at this a little bit further and try to figure out what's going on. But the problem with downtown Vancouver, not great woodpecker habitat. So that's a symptom that it's kind of removed from your priority matrix when you're trying to make decisions. Another thing I learned from CFS is that when EAB attacks a branch, more often than not, those EAB are going to be on to your life cycle. For some reason, it takes twice as long. Maybe the phloem isn't as thick on those branches, so just not as nutritious. We're not sure, but I didn't know that. Another thing I learned, I'm not a great rule follower, and for this, I broke a lot of the guidelines. Right? They recommend 2 branches, but I would take more than 2, especially when we're doing the bucket truck work. Right? We got the truck out, costs a lot of money. If we're taking off branches, might as well strip them, right? Peel them. And often there would be a branch that I'd want. I want a branch high up, preferably on the southern aspect, and as exposed as possible. So if it's kind of covered by other branches, other leaves, I don't really want that. I want a branch that's really exposed to the sun. These insects love the sun, right? So when I'm working with the bucket truck, oftentimes they would have to remove branches to get to the branch I want. And there was a couple times where it wasn't the branch that I wanted. It was the ones that they had to remove to get to the one I wanted that was positive. So, whatever's on the ground, I'm just taking with me, just peel them. So, and the other thing too is when in doubt, if you're looking at a tree and there's no signs, no symptom, or I won't say that. If there's a couple signs and symptoms, your spider sense is going, try to branch sample. And that park is a perfect example. Last year we looked at it, full canopy, no decline, no chlorosis, looks good. But because we knew it was so close to where the adult was found, I wanted to sample it, and it turned out to be positive. So, a lot of it's just luck too, right? This is the problem, is that you gotta be lucky. Other lessons learned is that on branches, you're not always going to get that typical S-shaped gallery. Here you can actually see it. This is where the egg was laid, and you can see there's a little bit of an S pattern going, but then it's just completely straight. Emergence too. I was expecting EAB to merge about late May, early June in Vancouver. I was driving down to Seattle, go watch my favorite baseball team. I get a text that the City of Vancouver had an adult land on their vehicle. So maybe the heat island effect of the city maybe led to earlier emergence. Pros and cons of branch sampling. One of the great things about branch sampling is that you've got a 74% chance of picking it up, even if the tree doesn't show outward signs or symptoms. Just like that one park there, right? You look at it, fully healthy, it looked healthy, no decline, no chlorosis. We did branch sample, and it is positive. So that's a pro. The other good thing about it is, if you have a trap on an ash tree and there's a EAB beetle on it, more than likely it's coming from that tree, but you don't know, right? The trap is just intercepting stuff out in the air. So you still have to do more work to figure out if that tree has it. Or when you're branch sampling, you got a gallery, it's coming from that tree. The negatives, it is so slow, right? It takes a long time. There is a park that had 74 trees around the perimeter, 74 ash trees. It took me 45 minutes just to walk it, to figure out what trees I actually wanted to sample. So, and then then once you pick your trees, you got to pick your branches, then you got to cut your branches, then you got to process the branches, bring them back to the lab, start peeling. Slow, slow, slow. Not always 100% successful. One of the first slides I showed you when we were branch sampling in 2023, that was 100 feet away from where the adult beetle was. And we went back this March and we sampled one branch from every single tree, all negative. About 5 months later, city staff were just walking by, didn't even have to peel bark. They see galleries at eye level that just happen to pop out. So it's not 100% successful. You can't get false negatives. Burnaby, for sure, there's false negatives in Burnaby. I picked the wrong tree. I picked the wrong branch. It is physically demanding. I've got to take my risks, and it is a hard thing to do. So it's physically taxing, and then there's safety issues too. So what's Vancouver going to do? One of the first things that we did, CFIA, we're a federal agency, and we're responsible for regulating emerald ash borer. So we put a regulated area around the entire city of Vancouver. The city said they were going to cut down every single infested ash tree, and then any adjacent ash that was in decline, they were going to take that down too. And then they were going to try to stem inject about 1,000 ash trees, within a kilometer or two of the infested trees. Unfortunately, they haven't done it yet. Every single tree is still standing right now. And one of the reasons is that, they're under, budget cuts and resource limitations like a lot of us. They're dealing with Stanley Park, where they're trying to take down, I think, 10,000 hemlocks that were killed by the hemlock looper. So they're being pulled in different directions. So unfortunately, those trees are still standing. The good thing is that they're all city trees, and all the ash are really city trees. There's a little bit of private, but the city trees are not going to be a risk for future infestations, right? Somebody just can't come in, cut down the infested tree, and take it for firewood. It's not going to happen. So that's a good thing. A bad thing is that Vancouver does not qualify for EAB biocontrol. There's these tiny little wasps that attack emerald ash borer and help to sort of reduce the populations. But in order for a city or a jurisdiction or whomever to be a good candidate for biocontrol, the one main criteria is that you have to be able to leave standing ash trees upright for like at least a year after they die. What you need is the wasp need to have a constant food source of EAB. So you can't get rid of the host trees. But unfortunately, that's going to be a safety hazard, right? So cities, unless you have naturalized areas, riparian green belts where you can leave ash trees standing that are infested, you're not going to qualify for biocontrol. So that's what Vancouver is supposed to do. What are we, the federal government, going to be doing? So I got to start branch sampling in the adjacent cities. We've already done Burnaby, so we can cross that off, but there's a ton of other cities I got to look for. I'm 5 years away from retirement. My destiny, I'm going to be branch sampling for another 5 years. That's the way it is. I'm going to be dropping way more F-bombs than I need to be, but that's what's going to happen. One of the things I've been thinking about lately, we're going to be moving into cities that have a lot more green belts, right? And they're not going to have ash in those green belts, but they're going to have other dead and dying trees, which are good woodpecker habitat. So I'm thinking the cities that we're going to go to, maybe to save a bit of time and not be as physically demanding, is to do like a winter, spring, a woodpecker damage survey. I think we can go through a city much quicker, and it's going to pop out. Leaves aren't on there, that type of damage, you're going to see the contrast quite quickly. So that's one of the things I'm thinking about. Another thing I'm thinking about is trying to have a couple workshops where one city hosts an EAB workshop. Talk about the beetle, talk about how to survey for it. We'll actually go out and put up traps. We'll actually go and branch sample too. So I was hoping we had have one city sort of in the west. They invite other cities. They invite private arborists, anybody else that wants to learn about it. And then we have another city further east that does the same thing. I was just working with the city of Calgary the last few days. And, this is something that I wouldn't mind doing here as well. So if you do work for the city, maybe we can talk later. You're interested? Yep. Okay. We'll talk later. Yep. I'm working with the University of Fraser Valley. It's just an undergraduate university, but they do have like an honors thesis program. So fortunately, I've got a student that's actually going to branch sample in Abbotsford. It's about 60 kilometers east of Vancouver. So that's another city that we're going to try to tackle, but this gentleman's going to do all the work. I did mention traps. Traps are okay. They're just not great. The pheromone's pretty good, but the green pouch, it doesn't smell like an ash leaf or an ash tree. It just smells like a hardwood leaf. So it's not a great trap. But we're still going to try it. I mean, you just can't do branch sampling. You just can't rely on the public to report it to you, right? Once it becomes visible to the public, it's probably spread quite far. So we are still looking at traps, and I'm working with a company called Synergy, and we're doing some local research in the Vancouver area. Just want to quickly go over biocontrol. These things are all from China. They've all been approved by Canada to be released here. This one here is a larval parasitoid, I think. Yes. And then this one's an egg parasitoid. And, so if you do have ash in areas that you can leave standing once they're infested, then you might be qualified for biocontrol. Vancouver and all the cities in BC, because we're basically just kind of urban islands of ash, none of those cities are going to qualify for biocontrol. This photo here just shows you where both USDA APHIS, the Forest Service, and then also the Canadian Forest Service up here have released biological control agents. Just some of the sites that they're releasing at. So last thing I want to do is just talk about, just recommendations. When I'm looking for it, when I'm looking for EAB, I just don't rely on one thing. There's no one silver bullet to try to find this thing. You got to do whatever you can. Ash tree inventory. If you guys have ash, try to get an inventory. Know where your ash are so that you know where you have to go to manage it. Consider branch sampling. It does take time. It is physically demanding, but it is a really good tool to use. And even if you only branch sample a couple trees a year, right, that's better than nothing. Even set some EAB traps. I was just talking to Alexandra Coker down in the city of Calgary, and she put up 200 traps last year, which is unheard of. Like, that is a lot of traps. It's impressive. But what she's done is she's targeted all her clusters. I really like the approach, right? It's another tool. Maybe she gets lucky too, right? We don't know. But you got to try different things. When you are using traps, so try to put them as high up in the canopy as possible. Right now, I'm working with the University of Winnipeg, and we're trying to figure out why EAB isn't behaving in Winnipeg like it is everywhere else. It hasn't devastated all the ash trees there. The city did a great job. Once they found it, they started cutting down infested trees, and they started stem injecting adjacent ash, right? So that may have contributed to it. But usually when you find EAB, it's not just that one pocket. You find satellites, just like what's happening in Vancouver, but Winnipeg doesn't have those satellites. It's really only that one core where it is. So we're thinking in Winnipeg, longer, colder winters, maybe that's forcing more of the larvae on a 2-year life cycle than a 1 year. So it takes twice as long to develop. They're exposed to mortality factors for twice as long. We're not sure. But in order for us to determine if they're on a 2-year life cycle, we need the larvae. So we have to find infested trees. What University of Winnipeg is doing is they hired a bucket truck, and they put traps, like 30, 40 feet up into the canopy. And in areas where the ground traps are negative, they're actually picking up EAB in traps high up in the canopy. So they like to attack as high as they can. So when I'm doing branch sampling, I want to get the highest branches as possible. So like when you're working with a bucket truck, easy to do. When you're setting traps, do the best you can. Try to put them as high as possible. The other thing I've been thinking about lately is, sniffer dogs they've been used for pests, Asian longhorn beetle, down in the U.S. It is quite successful. It's a catchy, sexy thing. A lot of my managers say, why don't you use the sniffer dogs? And I would tell them the technology is not there. For the pests that we wanted to use sniffer dogs for, we didn't have the pests where we wanted to survey. So then you have to take the dogs and the trainer, send them to infested areas, which costs money. Or if they're going to do training where they are, there has to be a quarantine facility, and then you can send specimens over. All that is costly, and it was really cost prohibitive. Now, there seems to be some technology where you can do remote scenting. You take the larvae, put it on like filter paper, you wash the solvent over it, the solvent sort of extracts all the volatiles from it, it gets caught on the filter paper, and then you can use the filter paper to train the dogs. When Alex with Calgary told me how many ash she has, I dropped another F-bomb. Like, I just couldn't believe it. They have 75,000 city ash, and then if you account for the private, it's 250,000, 250,000 ash trees. Like, my mouth dropped, and I didn't say nothing until the last day when it was just kind of, there's no managers, there's kind of workers. I told them they're screwed. They're absolutely screwed. 250,000 ash is a lot to look after. How are you going to find it there? I think sniffer dogs is something that, is Janet here? Maybe this is something to start off with. Maybe Stop Dead, the province could work with city, pool monies together to get maybe a dog or two for the province to start off with. But I said to Alex, once Calgary, Edmonton, Lethbridge, any city that has a large volume of ash, they probably should get their own sniffer dog, right? I was driving down 19th Avenue to go to the workshop, and it is just lined with ash. If I got a branch sample of that, it's going to take forever. But you got a sniffer dog, you can go through it much quicker. So maybe that's something to consider. I don't know. More recommendations. City of Hamilton back, I think it was about 2008. The way that they found EAB in their city is that they had been training not just their city arborists, but they also trained private arborists to try to have a quick little scan when you're pruning or you're cutting down ash trees. Try to have a quick little scan of the branches before you put them in the chipper, and that's how they found it. So one thing city can do is to try to train their staff, try to train some private arborists. You can take this card with you too, right? This is it's pretty thick stock. It's kind of waterproof, waterproof, resistant, durable, right? Take that out with you. It's a good little reference there. The other thing I've been thinking about is cities and other jurisdictions maybe look at developing community science programs. Try to get volunteers involved. You need eyes out there, right? If is there anybody City of Red Deer here? Anybody from the city in Alberta? Just throw out how many ash you guys got if you know it. 100,000, you're Edmonton? Right? You guys are screwed, man. Right? So you need eyes out there. Maybe, community science, but also public outreach, right? I can give you all those cards. I got tattoos too. I got the file for you guys. You guys can print the tattoos. Just try to get as many people as possible looking for it, right? Because you're going to need that help. That's a lot of trees. Sorry. I'm just, yeah. The other thing too with community science is, maybe you can get, high school, college students to work on it. Maybe they're putting out traps. Maybe they're just doing woodpecker surveys. Some of them can branch sample. Who knows, right? Adopt a street, right? Maybe you can get adopt a street programs going where, the neighbors can kind of just monitor the trees and contact the city if they see something suspect. And don't plant ash. I know there's some nurseries here and that's going to be crap news to hear, right? It's going to suck. But if you're a city or whatever, if you plant ash now, right, it's going to cost $900 to plant the ash. You got to look after it. Then you're going to have to take it out. You will have to take it out. So then there's a removal cost, and then you're going to have to replace it. So I know there's not many options, right? But look at diversifying, right? Maybe look at some of the lindens, some other trees, bur oak, right? I know there's limitations, but don't plant ash. If you plant ash now, you're just creating more problems. I live in Port Moody, and I got problems with EAB, and I've seen some newly planted whips, and I'm like, what are you guys doing? Like, I'm in my truck, and I'm like, I might as well just drive these things over, right? Like, let's get rid of these things. I don't want to be working on it. I don't want to branch sample them, right? So, it sucks. And if you're a nursery, right, you make a lot of money off ash, but I mean, that market's also going to, probably disappear too. So just start getting prepared for it now. It sucks. It's crappy news, but try to transition out of it. If you do have, so EAB is not known to occur in Canada or in Alberta, right? So if you have anything suspect, if you've got some grubs, some adults, you do have to send it to CFIA. We'll get it ID'd and we can do official confirmation. So, most of the big cities in Alberta has a CFIA office. I can give you, numbers and names, to contact. You can drop off specimens. We can also come and pick them up too. And if you're out and about, you're not sure if you have EAB, maybe you want some confirmation from me, take a good photograph. Make sure it's in focus. Try to have something there for scale, and flip the photo to me. What happens when EAB is found in Alberta? So probably the first 3 to 4 cities that get it, I'm going to come out. I'm going to help. I'm going to help get the delimitation going. If it's positive, proven by our lab, what's likely going to happen is we're going to regulate the whole city or the whole county. And that means any ash product within that regulated area can't move out of it. Once a regulated area is in place by CFIA, CFIA doesn't go back in there and survey. So, and then it's all up to landowners to manage the dead and dying ash within that regulated area. It sucks, sounds harsh, but we just don't have the money to try to help out with any type of management. I mean, there's so many cities that are just devastated by it. So that's the unfortunate reality. But I will come out and I will come out and help get going. If there's any small towns, when budgets are tight, maybe you don't have the infrastructure for bucket trucks or big equipment, we can talk off the side too. And, I don't mind coming out and doing some training and all that as well. So there's my email address. You want cards, you want tattoos, just shoot me an email. I'll send it to you all for free. If you've got photographs, email it to me too. I'll take a look at it. If you got suspect specimens, please contact me or a local CFI office. Get it dropped off, there. So thanks for your time. I'm emotionally better by getting this off my chest again. I will try not to swear as much anymore, but, thanks for your time. I appreciate that.